Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to bring to you Dr. Nissa Keyashian. She is so many things. It's very hard for me to introduce her without saying she's a psychiatrist, author, blogger, mother, good friend. So I'll let her explain a little bit more about herself, and we'll be discussing her new book. It's called Practicing Stillness, 50 Simple Exercises to Slow Down, Live in the Moment, and find peace. So very excited to talk to you about this book, and I'd love to hear more about you.
Yes, thank you, Jillian. I'm so excited to be here on your YouTube channel. So yeah, my name is Nissa, and I am a psychiatrist in private practice in San Jose. I'm also a mom to 2 sons, and I blog at A Mindful MD, which is just about emotional, physical, spiritual health. And I have this new book coming out soon.
And if you needed a closer look at it, it looks like this. I had the opportunity to read it, and it's absolutely fantastic, a great resource. So really looking forward to talking to you more about it. And the book, Practicing Stillness, is obviously about stillness. And I know that you've invested a lot of your time and your research into mindfulness and stillness. Can you tell us a little bit more about your story and how that has come to be?
Sure. So I really found mindfulness back in 2008. So right after I graduated medical school, I matched into internal medicine. I initially went to medical school to become a psychiatrist, but I got kind of distracted along the way. My dad is from Iran and kind of pushed me away from psychiatry into internal medicine. There's even more stigma in Persian culture around mental health than there is here. And I started internal medicine residency and I was miserable and I was like, what am I doing? And I ended up leaving the program, and that was not a fun time in my life because I had moved, I had bought a house, I had a couple $100,000 in loans. And I was like, what am I doing? Why did I go to medical school? And that period of time, I found a mindfulness book. And I talk about this in my book, but I came across the 7 principles of mindfulness, which are acceptance, patience, trust, letting go, non-striving, non-judging, and this concept called beginner's mind. And I was like, wow, this is not how I live. But I had a sense that it was going to be profoundly healing for me. And so I stuck with it. And since that time, I have been practicing meditation and yoga. I made my way back to psychiatry, and in residency, one of my mentors was a psychologist who was doing MBSR groups for the veterans at the VA that I was training in. And I kept sending him all of my patients. And he was like, hey, thanks for all the referrals. Do you want to come and learn this? And I was like, absolutely, I do. And I went to his MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I loved every aspect of it. And then I went through his clinical training program to be a mindfulness instructor. And since then, I've been incorporating that into patient care. And I have found it very transformative for me and other people. And so I started blogging about it, and I went through yoga teacher training. There's a lot of parallels between yoga and mindfulness. And here I am now.
Yeah, and so for people that might have heard of mindfulness but may not have had exposure to it, can you tell them, I know there's multiple examples, we're talking about 50 simple exercises, but are there some ways that you like to introduce the concept of mindfulness to people?
Yeah, so mindfulness is very much about coming into the present moment. So really grounding into our sense perceptions, because our sense perceptions are always happening here and now. So becoming aware of sensations like feeling the chair that you're sitting in, feeling the floor under your feet. The breath is a great anchor to the present moment. So you really want to focus on the part of your breath that feels the most pleasant in your body. And then also we can become mindful of our thoughts, our emotions. That can be a little bit more challenging. but we can do it.
Yeah, and I was thinking too, when you were identifying that internal medicine wasn't resonating with you, an experience of a shared experience and resonating my first path was something that I did pivot from. Can you say some examples of when you were starting to get into mindfulness? We think about this, oh, it feels so good because I'm mindful. But at the early stages, can you identify some feelings that you've had or how that start was for you?
Yeah, I think it can be challenging starting with mindfulness. I always recommend starting with a small amount of time because you really want to set yourself up for success. A lot of people say, I'm not meditating right because I can't clear my mind. And that is not the goal of mindfulness or meditation. So one of my favorite sayings is the mind produces thoughts like the mouth produces saliva. So it's just what the mind does. It's not that it's doing anything wrong. So meditation mindfulness is more about changing our relationship to our thoughts rather than like getting rid of thoughts. And so starting small, and one of the biggest transformative parts of mindfulness is this idea of beginning again. So when you're meditating, if you have a focus like your breath or thoughts or emotions, and you notice that your mind has gone somewhere else, maybe you're worried about something coming up in your life, or maybe you're ruminating on something you said to somebody earlier in the day. When you notice that your mind has left your focus, deciding to begin again, so coming back to the present moment, that is where a lot of the magic and power is, because in our lives, in our day-to-day lives, we have to decide, we have to build awareness around when we have left our focus and then coming back again.
Yeah, and I was thinking too, for being a veteran or any sort of that discomfort of life, like our life, there's a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and sometimes mindfulness, you're aware of that. And I think that sometimes we get really, really busy because we don't want to sit in the discomfort of the real thoughts that we're having and the real emotions that we're having. Can you explain how mindfulness might help not to get rid of those, but to observe and to process them?
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to mention too, so, I've talked a lot about mindfulness, but I think, they say that if one wing of the bird is mindfulness, the other wing is loving kindness meditation. And I think variations of loving kindness meditation and self-compassion can be really helpful with difficult thoughts and feelings. And so, and this also speaks to, part of the definition of mindfulness. We really want to cultivate this kind, gentle awareness. So we have to be careful that when we notice upsetting thoughts and emotions, that we're not layering judgment on top of judgment. Like, oh my God, I'm so judgmental. What's wrong with me? Or I'm so filled with anger. So we want to build this kind, gentle awareness. If we notice fear, if we notice anger, if we notice shame, just kind of being aware of it. And then showing up with self-compassion for ourselves, that can help us make space for our whole experience.
That's super. And in exploring your book and hearing kind of your deep dive into mindfulness, can you tell us, you had that mentor for the MBSR? Can you tell us about some other mentors in your life or some other inspirations that you have?
Sure. So when I found mindfulness, I just started voraciously reading like anything I could. Eckhart Tolle is one of my favorite authors. He wrote The Power of Now, and his books are awesome. And then there's so many others. So Jack Kornfield is another awesome person in this field. He has a retreat center in Northern California called Spirit Rock, and he's a psychologist. And when he was young, he traveled to Asia, like many of my favorite teachers, and studied Eastern religions, and then brought back all of the teachings. Sharon Salzberg is another person. She's really well known for loving kindness meditation. Tara Brach is super awesome, is also a psychologist. Ram Dass is one of my favorites as well. He passed away a couple years ago. And then Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away this year. So all of these people are just so inspiring. They're just like such good human beings. And I just kind of read as much as I could get my hands on, and I found it to be just very like comforting. And as I kept practicing and I went on some retreats, I found that the stillness that I was creating was helping me in other areas of my life, and so I just stuck with it.
I love that. And it's very evident when you're reading this book, like the beginning, the amount of research that you did to invest in the time that you put into this book. Can you tell us about what to expect from this book?
Yeah, so the book has 2 introductory chapters telling you a little bit more about stillness and how it has been practiced like through the ages, starting with Buddhism, touching on Christianity, yoga, Stoicism, and then, talking about the explosion of mindfulness that has made its way into many different areas, clinical medicine, but then also like life coaching and psychology and childhood education, business programs. The second chapter is also introductory, and it talks about the 7 principles of mindfulness that I referenced earlier. And then it talks about building a practice, the best ways to build a practice to incorporate stillness practice into your life. And some expectations, some, typical experiences as you start to build these practices. And then I have a list of 50 practices. That's the second part of the book. And many of the first practices are kind of standard mindfulness and yoga practices that you'll see in other places. And then as the practices go on, I started to incorporate spiritual teachings, but then also psychotherapy, and trying to like weave it all together.
Yeah, and as you weaved it all together, it's, it sounds complex, but the book it's very easy to follow. So, when I would be an introductory person into mindfulness. I have exposure to it and I need more of it in my life. And so when I was reading this, I was like, oh, this is so helpful. And the way it's laid out, it's easy to follow. It really gives you that layout of understanding what mindfulness is, what stillness is. And then I love the way that you have the guided practices so that you can really focus and develop the skills. Do you want to explain a little bit more about how you develop those 50 simple exercises?
Sure. Yeah. So I started with a lot that are in MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. So just, awareness of sensations, grounding. So a lot of people have heard grounding used for anxiety. So grounding is what I was talking about before, just like really grounding into your body and your sense perceptions. And then I just built on those. I have some yoga practices in there, mindful movement, mindfulness of eating. Really a lot of times we eat rushing or working, we're not paying attention to our bodies and the food. And so really slowing down. And then there's a lot of journaling in there. So I introduced this concept of journaling because that's been so healing for me. And then I just go through a lot of different spiritual teachings. And then, like I said, some psychotherapy as well.
Yeah, and it's so great because I was going and in the book you say you recommend reading it from front to back, but if you find it an exercise that really resonate, like stick through it. Obviously, no one's going to be judging or evaluating which if you've gone through the full book. And I found specific ones, especially, when it comes to being with a child, like, I sent you the image of being with a dog and just simple things, if it comes to eating and that's something that you're really working on, like if you're really working on something in particular, my imagination is thinking you just really utilize that aspect, hone in your practice with that aspect, because I feel like then you're getting that feedback of something that you really want to help in. And then you can explore the other exercises. Is that what you would recommend, or how would you recommend to best use the book?
Yeah, if you have some foundation or introduction to mindfulness, I think that you can start anywhere you want. But if you don't have a lot of exposure to mindfulness, you might really want to start with the first practices, because I think as you practice, sitting with your breath and then sitting with your sensations, your thoughts, your emotions, the later practices start to dive deeper into kind of more kind of up level concepts. There's also, like you were mentioning, mindfulness with children and like shopping and transportation. A lot of people can have anxiety around driving or flying.
That would be me. As you can see, the ambiance is a little different. Drove from Houston to San Antonio, and I don't even like to drive to the grocery store in Houston. So there were so many great exercises in this book, and you can really, you crafted it in such a way that I just love it as a resource. I'm like, everyone needs this as a resource. And I may be a little biased because of my absolute need for peace. But when I think about it, I'm at a conference, for hopefully you'll be able to come at some point for women physicians and dentists. And I'm thinking, all of us could really utilize this book. And then when we think about the greater society, I'm like, I'm pretty sure everybody could really use this book. So if people are interested in looking more into the book and getting it for themselves, where can they find it?
So it's on Amazon. So you can just search Practicing Stillness, and there's links on my blog, which is A Mindful MD.
Yeah, and that blog, I know that you told a little bit about it and it's more the mindfulness, but you started the blog a while back. Can you share a little bit more about what is on your blog right now?
Yeah, so I started the blog in 2018 and I started writing about mindfulness. I blogged throughout my yoga teacher training. So I blogged kind of how that process went. I blog a lot about being a mom and dealing with things like mom guilt. And then also psychiatry. I talk about, psychiatric medications and OCD, which is like one of my favorite things to treat. And, just all different kinds of things from like mental health and spirituality.
That's super. So we'll go ahead and we'll make sure to put the information so that people can find that after they watch this video. Is there any other place that people should look to connect with you?
So I'm on Facebook on A Mindful MD, and I have Instagram that I recently started. So I'm trying to do that, although I'm not so good at it.
And I am really not that great at it too. So we'll work on that together. Well, that sounds
Awesome.
good. And what's your Instagram name?
It's A Mindful MD.
Makes it easy for us, right?
Yeah.
And is there any lasting lessons you'd like to share with the audience?
I just say, start this, even if it's 2 minutes a day. It's best if you can do this on a daily practice. But if you, miss a day or miss like a month, that's fine. Let it go. Don't beat yourself up. Just try to recommit to it. And as you continue with this, you'll find your ability, to find peace during really difficult situations to be such a strength in your life. So I hope that you can stick with it.
That's so great. And thank you so much, Dr. Nissa Keyashian, for practicing stillness, 50 simple exercises to slow down, live in the moment, and find peace. And I hope you grab yours and let us know how you like it.